This is Unit 3, Lesson 3, the principles of reinforcement. And here is your Unit 3, Lesson 3 vocabulary. Today we're going to be focusing on the principles of reinforcement, what they mean, and how to distinguish between positive and negative reinforcement. After this presentation, we should be able to identify different types of feedback, both positive and negative, explain what positive reinforcement looks like, explain what negative reinforcement looks like. Differentiate between positive and negative feedback and positive negative reinforcement. And understand how feedback influences athletes in sport and exercise. So after watching those clips and getting an understanding of the positive and negative reinforcement that can be used, what exactly is reinforcement? Well, reinforcement is anything that increases likelihood that a behavior will occur in the future under the same conditions. It's designed to enhance both the quantity and quality of a behavior. For example, telling an athlete good job when they master a new skill, or increasing an athlete's playing time for their hard work and practice. I'm sure we're all used to there are different types of sport reinforcement. What is the most frequently used reinforcer in sport? Well, it's verbal praise. And what is the most powerful reinforcer in sport? Playing time. And on the opposite end of the spectrum from reinforcement is punishment. So, what is punishment? What does it look like in a sporting environment? Punishment is the presentation of an aversive stimuli in order to decrease the quantity or quality of a behavior. An example would be criticizing an athlete who's not paying attention, or suspending an athlete from the team for 4 games for breaking some team rules. What are the most frequently used punishments in sport? Well, just like for reinforcement and praise, where verbal reinforcement and verbal praise is the most common form, verbal punishment, like getting yelled at or having a coach yell at you, criticizing you publicly and openly, is the most common form of punishment in sport. What the most powerful form of punishment in sport is lack of playing time, even including a suspension or dismissal from the team. So looking at the two and comparing positive versus negative reinforcement. Positive reinforcement is meant to increase the likelihood that the behavior in quantity and quality, or both, will occur under the same conditions again. And negative reinforcement can change both the quantity and quality of a behavior. So, can we think of an example of a time in our past where we've had both positive and negative reinforcement and how it impacted us as an athlete? Looking at the punishment side, there are two main forms of punishment. So, punishment entails the presentation of negative actions or behavior with the goal of suppressing the behavior. And then there's a response cost punishment. This is taking away something that's valued by the athlete. If they're a captain or an assistant captain on a team, removing that captain's moniker, removing that assistant captain moniker can be a form of punishment, something that's incredibly valued to the individual athlete within their team concept. While there are some positives that can come about from punishment of an athlete, there's tremendous negative side effects as well. See, punishment promotes fear and can prompt athletes to become motivated solely by the fear of failure. It develops an unpleasant team climate that reduces enjoyment overall for all participants within the team. It also reduces the coach's ability to be a good or positive role model by constantly punishing players for their actions. And it severely limits the ability of a coach to develop good coach-athlete relationships within the team. So how exactly can coaches succeed? Well, through negative reinforcement, coaches communicate they're caring for players as people. So abuse is not taken personally. It's how they show they care. They recruit talented athletes with the idea of better players equal better coaching. Negative reinforcement coaches often recruit thick-skinned athletes who are less bothered by the abuse. Um, they even become skilled teachers and tacticians who can overcome the abuse. How do positive reinforcement coaches succeed? Well, famous UCLA men's basketball coach John Wooden liked to say that they view mistakes as the stepping stones to achievement. The emphasis is placed on improving skills rather than not screwing up, understanding that we're all going to make mistakes because it's a process, learning a sport, mastering a sport, learning a new skill, mastering a skill. And most top coaches and teachers use positive reinforcement at a very high percentage, like 80 to 90% of collegiate coaches, high school coaches, I'm sure we're all aware of that, use positive reinforcement and a minimal amount of punishment. They don't want it to become an adversarial relationship between the coach and the athlete. Why do positive control coaches succeed? Well, first off, they foster a positive learning environment in which mistakes are viewed as part of learning. They promote positive coach-athlete relationships. Athletes tend to like positive coaches more. Athletes tend to enjoy that sport experience more because of the team culture, the team atmosphere. It creates a high team cohesion. Simply put, athletes perform better with positive control coaches. How do you give performance feedback and still try to maintain some sense of positivity? Well, going back to John Wooden, men's basketball coach at UCLA, 75% of his feedback to his team was instructional in nature, was teaching in nature. Because feedback can motivate the athletes directly, and feedback can also focus your attention and enhance your effort, promote persistence, and stimulate use of new task strategies, new ways of learning the information, new ways of learning your playbook, new ways of learning your role, learning your assignments, new ways of being a better teammate. It all comes from performance feedback. And if that feedback is instructional in nature, it's meant to help the athlete perform better, they're more likely to be receptive to the feedback. So looking at that performance feedback and positive versus negative coaches, we need to look at the process called shaping, which is a human operant conditioning. Shaping breaks down a complex skill into a series of manageable parts or goals and systematically uses reinforcement to gradually improve performance. So, like if you're starting at the bottom of a set of stairs where the A is, and you're trying to climb all the way up to the top to the B, each step on that ladder is positively reinforced. Each step that an athlete improves on from step one to step two to step three to step four, all the way to the top of the steps to B. Each time there's immediate reinforcement. And after every goal is reached, the individual is rewarded. And that's positive reinforcement is reinforced every time. That's called human operant conditioning. Every time you get subsequently better, you're rewarded, and positive reinforcement helps you achieve the next step. Shaping is catching athletes doing something well, or at least better, and then gradually reinforcing them to modify that enhancement. So what you do is you start by praising an athlete every time they do something right. And then you begin to introduce delayed reinforcement. You begin to reinforce every third time they do that thing right, or every fifth time, or every seventh time, or every ninth time. And then once that goal is mastered, the shaping moves on to step two, and you repeat the process with something harder. It's called the what's next philosophy. We mastered this goal. Now, what's next? What's the next goal I need to learn and master? That human operant conditioning or shaping is reinforced through reinforcement schedules. So, continuous schedules are where you reinforce positive outcomes immediately. And every time someone does something and they enhance immediate motivation, but that immediate motivation starts to wane over time. So then you introduce partial schedules on certain intervals or ratios. So a partial schedule is when reinforcement is delayed and occurs on a schedule such as every third or fifth or seventh or ninth time. This helps enhance long-term motivation and retention. What exactly is it to reinforce something? Well, you should reinforce effort. Reinforce the importance of learning new skills, learning new material, of skill improvement. Reinforce the positive effects of mental preparation, of strategy selection and use. And definitely you want to reinforce reaching one's goals. Within the motivational climate, shaping creates a mastery oriented motivational climate that fosters intrinsic motivation, learning, and improvement. Outcome-based rewards promote an ego-oriented motivational climate that prompts an overemphasis on winning, on fear of failure, on underdevelopment, and underachievement. They're on completely opposite ends of the spectrum. That leads us to reinforcement and intrinsic motivation. The self-determination theory confirms that reinforcement doesn't have to reduce intrinsic motivation as long as it is given to recognize increased competence and enhance greater levels of self-determination. See, contingent rewards, rewards that, oh, if we score 30 points this game, there's rewards of more playing time in future games. There's rewards of more responsibility in future games. Those are self-determined goals, not external reward goals. We determine our ability to play more in future games or have a bigger responsibility based on how we perform ourselves versus how we do things outwardly to try to get a predetermined goal. And through it all, behavioral coaching tendencies and practices dramatically impact the connections athletes foster with their coach and help create a sense of community. It comes with the understanding that athletes are more than what they produce on the field. And behavioral coaching tendencies and practices tend to teach skills in a way that allows for greater opportunities to use reinforcement positively. Bottom line, athletes respect good coaching. Athletes respect hard work and effort and hustle from teammates. And coaches respect athletes who have those traits. It's a cycle.